In the shadow of the Alderwood forest, nestled deep within a valley often shrouded in mist, lay the quaint village of Ravensbrook. It was a place of rolling hills, fertile soil, and a close-knit community where everyone knew each other's names and secrets. The villagers lived simple lives, content in their routines, blissfully unaware of the darkness that lurked on the edge of their world. But Ravensbrook had a secret, one that the elders spoke of only in whispers, and the children heard in the form of cautionary tales. It was said that many years ago, a witch had been wronged by the villagers, and in her fury she cursed the land. The elders insisted it was just a story, a relic of an older time meant to keep children from wandering too far into the forest. But there were those who believed the curse was real, and that the witch's wrath still lingered, waiting for the right moment to strike. The witch's name was Isolde, and she had once been a healer, known for her knowledge of herbs and her ability to cure ailments that others could not. The villagers had come to her with their troubles, and she had helped them without question. But as with many tales of magic, fear and envy soon crept into the hearts of those she had aided. They whispered that her powers were unnatural, that she was in league with dark forces, and that her cures came at a terrible price. One year, during a particularly harsh winter, a plague swept through Ravensbrook. The villagers, desperate and afraid, turned to Isolde for help. She did what she could, but the sickness was relentless, taking lives regardless of her efforts. As more villagers succumbed to the illness, the whispers grew louder, turning into accusations. It wasn't long before the villagers turned on her, convinced that she was the cause of their suffering. They came for her in the dead of night, dragging her from her cottage at the edge of the forest. They bound her hands and feet, and without trial or mercy, they declared her a witch and sentenced her to death. Isolde, pleading for her life, swore that she had done nothing wrong, but her cries fell on deaf ears. The villagers, driven by fear and anger, burned her at the stake in the village square. As the flames consumed her, she cursed them with her dying breath, vowing that Ravensbrook would pay for their cruelty. The years passed, and the story of Isolde became a cautionary tale, a ghost story told around the fire to frighten children. But the curse she placed upon the village was far from forgotten. Strange things began to happen in Ravensbrook. Crops would wither without reason, livestock would fall ill and die, and people would disappear into the forest, never to be seen again. Those who returned spoke of seeing a figure in the woods, a woman with eyes like burning coals and a voice that echoed with sorrow and rage. The villagers tried to forget the curse, to push the memory of Isolde into the recesses of their minds. But every year, on the anniversary of her death, the village would experience a night of terror, when the curse would manifest in some new, horrifying way. The elders called it the Night of Shadows, and it was a time when the villagers would lock their doors, shutter their windows, and pray for dawn. One year, a young woman named Maren moved to Ravensbrook. She was not a native of the village, but had come from a nearby town, drawn by the promise of work and a fresh start. Maren had heard the stories of the curse, but like many newcomers, she dismissed them as old wives' tales. She was a practical woman, grounded in reality, and did not believe in curses or witches. Maren found work as a seamstress and quickly became a part of the community. She was well liked, and her skill with needle and thread made her popular among the villagers. But as the anniversary of Isolde's death approached, Maren began to notice strange things happening in the village. People whispered about seeing strange lights in the forest, and more than one person claimed to have heard a woman's voice calling their name in the dead of night. The elders warned Maren to stay indoors on the Night of Shadows, but she brushed off their concerns. That night, as the sun set and the mist rolled in from the forest, Maren sat by her window watching the village settle into an uneasy silence. The streets were empty, and the only sound was the wind howling through the trees. Maren felt a chill run down her spine, but she shook it off, telling herself it was just the cold. As midnight approached, Maren began to feel uneasy. The air in her cottage seemed to grow heavier, as if the very walls were pressing in on her. The fire in her hearth flickered and dimmed, casting long shadows across the room. And then she heard it. A faint, mournful cry that seemed to come from the direction of the forest. Maren stood, her heart pounding in her chest. The cry came again, louder this time, and she realized it was a woman's voice calling her name. Maren felt an inexplicable pull, as if something was drawing her toward the door. She tried to resist, but her feet moved of their own accord, taking her to the door and out into the night. The village was eerily quiet, the mist thick and oppressive. Maren could barely see a few feet in front of her, but the voice continued to call her name, guiding her through the streets and toward the edge of the forest. She knew she should turn back, that whatever was calling her was not human, but she couldn't stop herself. The voice was both terrifying and compelling, filled with a sadness that tugged at her heart. Before she knew it, Maren found herself standing at the edge of the Alderwood forest. The trees loomed like dark sentinels, their branches twisted and gnarled. The voice called her name again, and Maren stepped into the forest, her heart racing. The mist swirled around her and the trees seemed to close in, forming a path that led deeper into the woods. As she walked, the voice grew louder, and Maren felt a presence behind her. She turned, expecting to see someone following her, but there was nothing, just the dark, empty forest. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that eyes were following her every move. The path led Maren to a clearing, where a lone ancient oak tree stood. Its branches were bare and its bark was blackened as if it had been struck by lightning. At the base of the tree, Maren saw a figure, a woman, standing with her back to her, her long dark hair flowing like a river of shadows. The woman turned slowly and Maren gasped. The woman's eyes were like burning coals, and her face was pale, almost translucent, as if she were a ghost. She wore a tattered cloak, and her lips were curled into a sad, knowing smile. "You came," the woman said, her voice soft and haunting. "I knew you would." Maren felt a chill run through her. "Who are you?" she whispered, though she already knew the answer. "I am Isolde," the woman replied, her eyes locking onto Maren's. "The Witch of Ravensbrook, though that is not the name I was born with. I was once a healer, a woman who sought to help those in need. But the villagers betrayed me, and now I am cursed to wander this forest, forever bound to the land that rejected me." Maren took a step back, fear gripping her heart. "What do you want from me?" Isolde's smile faded, and her expression became one of deep sorrow. "I want what was taken from me, my life, my future, my peace. The villagers have forgotten what they did, but I have not. Every year, on the anniversary of my death, I take from them as they took from me. But you, Maren, are different. You do not belong to this place, and yet you came here, drawn by something you do not understand." Maren's mind raced, trying to make sense of what Isolde was saying. "I don't belong here," she echoed, her voice trembling. "Then why did you call me?" Isolde stepped closer, her eyes softening. "Because you can end this, Maren. You can break the curse, but it will come at a great cost." Maren shook her head, confusion and fear warring within her. How? How can I break the curse?" The witch reached out and touched Maren's hand, her fingers cold as ice. "The villagers must remember. They must know the pain they caused, the life they destroyed. Only then can the curse be lifted. But to do that, I must leave this place, and for that, a life must be given, a willing sacrifice." Maren's heart skipped a beat. "You want me to die?" Isolde shook her head. "Not die, Maren. Sacrifice. Your life for theirs, your soul for their freedom. If you do this, the curse will be broken and I will finally find peace. But you must choose." Maren felt tears welling in her eyes. She didn't want to die, didn't want to give up the life she had just begun. But she also couldn't condemn the villagers to more suffering, not when she had the power to stop it. With a deep breath, Maren nodded. "I'll do it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll give my life to break the curse." Isolde smiled, a look of gratitude in her fiery eyes. "Thank you, Maren. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten." The witch stepped back, and Maren felt a warmth spread through her, as if the cold that had gripped her heart was melting away. The mist began to lift, and the forest seemed to come alive, the darkness retreating as light began to filter through the trees. Maren closed her eyes, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over her. She knew what she had to do, and she was ready. She had made her choice, and now it was time to pay the price. As the light grew brighter, Maren felt herself being pulled away, as if she were floating. She opened her eyes one last time and saw Isolde standing before her, no longer a witch, but a woman, her face free of sorrow, her eyes filled with gratitude. And then everything went white. The next morning, the villagers of Ravensbrook awoke to find the mist gone and the sun shining brightly over the valley. They emerged from their homes, blinking in the light, wondering what had happened. In the center of the village square, they found Maren, lying peacefully on the ground, her face serene, as if she were simply sleeping. Beside her, carved into the earth, were words that sent a shiver through their hearts. "The curse is lifted. Remember her sacrifice." The villagers gathered around, their hearts heavy with sorrow and guilt. They realized then what they had done, the terrible price they had paid for their ignorance and fear. And they knew that they could never forget Maren, the woman who had given her life to save them. From that day forward, Ravensbrook changed. The villagers lived with the memory of Isolde and Maren, and they vowed never to let fear and superstition rule their hearts again. The village prospered, the land healed, and the Night of Shadows became a memory. A story told to remind future generations of the price of fear and the power of sacrifice. And deep in the Alderwood forest, the ancient oak tree stood tall, its branches full of life, a symbol of the curse that had been broken and the peace that had finally been found.